Welcome to Acquire's In the Boardroom interview. My name's Gavin Houchell, one of the founders of the Acquire Group. I'm pleased today to be joined by Melanie Wilson, who recently joined a few boards, so thank you, Melanie, for your time.
No worries.
I think earlier this year you started with Baby Bunting as a non-exec director and then moved on to Shaver Shop and iSelect.
Yes.
So welcome.
Thank you.
So Melanie, perhaps you can set the scene by explaining your early career and what led you to moving into the boardroom.
Yeah, sure. I think, interestingly enough, I think when I think everyone does when they set out in their career, they never really know where they're going to end up, and I've sort of had that path my whole life. But I first started, my first job out of university was actually at a company I'd never heard of before called Goldman Sachs. Okay. And I remember interviewing with them, didn't know anything about what they did, but got a fantastic role with them doing M&A in their investment banking. And through them, it really gave me opportunities to travel. I got to go to New York a lot and work in Asia and sort of really broaden my my opportunities outside of Australia. I'd never left Australia for work or done anything. So while I was there, a lot of it was very common for people to go off and do an MBA, and that was something that I spoke to a number of my colleagues about. So I applied to a number of schools over in the US and actually in Europe, and did an MBA in Boston at Harvard. And I think that really then changed my whole outlook on where I wanted to go, and sort of then decided that investment banking and finance wasn't the area that I wanted to specialise in, and I then started to look at what other roles were out there for sort of someone with my background and my skills, and that gave me opportunities. I'd sit in class at business school with people who worked at Nike and at Disney, and I'd be sitting there going, wow, you worked at these amazing companies, from Australia. It seemed not possible, but once I was over there, I was like, wow, these opportunities could open. So from there, I joined Bain Co, and I think, joining one of the large strategy firms is a fantastic opportunity. The things that you learn along the way and the different opportunities you get and companies you get to work with. So I got to work across a number of different industries and learn about different businesses. I also got to learn about how to help companies solve problems, how to help them grow, how to help them reduce their costs. And I think those skills have really set me up in any job that I've done since then. While I was working for Bain, I got to work with a number of amazing clients in retail and other industries, and that led me to move into a company called Limited Brands, which owns Victoria's Secret. And I did some fantastic work with them before moving back to Australia and joining Brett Blundy, who owns a number of retail businesses here. So sort of all my roles have been sort of very strategic after joining Bain, and then after working for Brett for a number of years in sort of strategic roles, I went to Woolworths into their strategy group and then moved more into an operating role. So I think the strategy piece is a really good way to segue into other roles in other companies, so having a strategy background. So I think Bain has been a big catalyst to that, and doing my MBA as well.
Fantastic. And Mel, thinking about obviously a distinguished career through consulting, marketing, general management and strategy. Was there an actual catalyst, a point that made you think it's time to move into the non-exec role? And then I suppose the follow-up question to that is then, have you selected organisations and what's grabbed you?
No, I think probably since I moved back to Australia and I started working for Brett, I had a lot of involvement with boards. So whether I was reporting, when I was at Bain, I was reporting up into boards because often the boards would hire the consulting companies. So I have always sort of been very aware of boards' roles in organisations. When I worked for Brett, I did a lot around alternate boards. So he was on a lot of boards and I got to be his alternate director. So I, again, had a bit of exposure. When I started taking on a full-time exec role out at Woolworths, I started getting approached about being on other boards, and for me, it just wasn't the right time. I didn't have the capacity, to be honest, with the workload that I had in my full-time role. So I think when I decided to leave Woolworths last year, and I really wanted to make my life a little less complex, and so I think the opportunity came. I thought, people have been approaching me about boards. And I started putting my feelers out around where did I want to move to next, and I thought, I had some great experiences, and I thought I could really add some value in boards, and so I've sort of now moved to more of a board career at the moment, a board portfolio. Whether that means I won't ever go back into back into an exec role, I don't know. I think I'm leaving that door definitely open, but I think for my life at the moment, being on a board allows me to continue working and being involved in the companies that I really, really love to be involved with, and still have a really great role, but not have the day-to-day operating responsibilities, which, you know, when you've got other things going on in your life, can be very stressful. So it's been a different experience. So that's been great so far.
And how have you determined?
Which one? So I think, you know, a lot of that came down to my husband actually, I think, gave me some really good advice. He said a couple of years ago, he said, write out every company that you'd really want to be on the board of in Australia. And that sort of allowed me to sort of say, well, what are the types of companies that I really think are ones that I align to, and I think it would be really interesting opportunities. And some of those companies, you know, I wouldn't be able to jump on the board today because I don't have the experiences, but it sort of gave me an avenue and a path as to ones that around the thinking around what I wanted to do. I think for me, moving across, I wanted to move into companies that I could really add a lot of value, and I think my retail background over the number of 10 years has really helped with the likes of Baby Bunting and Shaver Shop. I mean, those businesses to me are very similar to the roles that I've had in the past, and I feel like there's a huge amount of value that I can add to them and experience. Now, as I start getting approached by a number of other companies, you know, it is around two things. One is I feel like I've got to understand it. I've got to really love what the company does. I think there's no point joining any company, whether it's as a full-time employee or as a board member, if you don't love and you're not passionate about the business. Because I think that's a key element. So you've got to love what they do. And I think, you know, iSelect, I think it's a fantastic business. I love what they do. It's still very much customer facing, so I understand their whole end-to-end with the customer. So again, that was a really easy decision for me. I understand how their business worked. And other boards that I'm looking at now, it's got to be the same thing. There's got to be a connection. There's got to be an understanding, and I've got to feel like I can really add value to them. I also am very interested in companies that are higher growth. So I think the strategy person in me sort of says, you know, are they actually capitalising on all the opportunities that are out there, and where's their growth, and do they have a clear pathway to grow? So they're the kinds of businesses that I'm sort of looking at. Absolutely.
And well, I advise and support both deputy divisional CFOs, GM finances that are aspiring to move into a group CFO role. What does a board look for when identifying or assessing a CFO? Yeah,
so it's a good question. I've actually worked with some wonderful CFOs, which is, you know, I've been very lucky with some of the businesses that I've worked with. And I think, to me, what makes a great CFO now is it's not just about the numbers person. I think you've really got to, it's got to be a bit broader. I think the skills that I sort of see a CFO needing to have is being much more strategic. And, you know, where I've seen great CEOs do really well is, you know, the company puts together their annual, you know, 1 year, 3 year, 5 year strategy, strategic goals and horizons, but it's having the CFO that then can actually help put the numbers around that. It's easy to say this is what we want to do over the next 3 years, but, you know, what do we need for that? What is the resources? What's the financial capital? How are we going to go about funding it? Do we actually have all of that? And having and what is the output going to be, and what's the value that we're going to create? And I think having someone that can help forecast and put those numbers together is really, really important. And a lot of I haven't seen too many CFOs being able to work with the company in pulling that strategy all together, whole piece, and I think they can be really fundamental in driving that. So I think that's key. Depending on the types of companies you want, I think, you know, as we look as ASX, because the companies that I'm involved with are more ASX, you need to, it's good if you've had some institutional experience. I think that's really key, or market experience, because a lot of your role is talking with analysts and being able to handle that. I think also M&A, transactional experience, is becoming more and more important as a lot of companies bring some of those skills in-house and helping look for the new opportunities to either buy businesses or potentially sell off or divest. So I think that can be really big. Probably the other one is around legal and contracts. A lot of good CFOs I've seen now actually look over and do a lot of negotiating of some of the biggest key contracts of companies now, especially companies where there's no in-house counsel. It's usually the CFO who has that role, so I think that's huge. And probably the last one that I think is really important is leadership. Now I often see when the CEO travels or goes away or something, often now you'll see the CFO is the one who's sort of put in charge. I think you sort of need to be that 2IC to the CEO, and I think that's really important, and that the company sees that you are the 2IC. And I think if you can establish that, then that combination, it's a really good combination to have.
Yeah, fantastic insights. Now, you've obviously worked both domestically, globally, in and on numerous retail businesses, and if you sort of consider the Australian landscape, perhaps some of our homegrown businesses, what do you think some of the risks and opportunities are for those businesses over the next 5 years?
Yeah, I think probably the biggest risk that I've seen over retail in the last few years is just complacency. I think, we just keep doing the same thing and not really being innovative enough. And that can be innovative in any way. It can be the types of products that we sell. It could be the type of technology that we're adapting. And I think there's a lot of work that companies can be doing to think, how do we become more innovative and drive and motivate the employees to do so, and to think that way, and not just, we're going to sell the same stuff each year and we're just going to sell a bit more of it. I think the other big things for me are, it's in this world of disruption, you've got to think now where everywhere now is you're being disrupted.
Yep.
That's the whole tech piece, and it's around, I look at customer journeys, and I think, can you actually map out your customer journey from the moment they go onto your website because they want to look to see if you sell something, to the moment they step into the store, and actually map out their whole journey and their process, and work out what are all the pain points. What are all those things that you could say, wow, customers really having a difficult experience here, how can we take that away? And I think Uber's a really good example. You think, I love Uber now. I go out now and I just take a credit card. A credit card and a phone, because I don't need money. When I get out, I don't have to wait and pay and all. They've just taken all that complexity out, and you've got to think about that across your whole business experience. And I think Dan Murphy's does it really well. They, and I actually know from working with the team at Dan Murphy's, they spend a lot of time looking at all the customer journeys and the customer touch points to their business, and they work out what are all the things that the customers, it really is challenging, and they take those away, and they come up with, 1 hour delivery or 3 hours delivery or pick up at all convenient points, and they just think about all the things that a customer might want and then try and solve those problems. So I think you've really got to understand your customer. Probably the next thing, I think, NPS is becoming really big. I know we talk about it a lot on the boards now, but I think with NPS it can be, you can get numbers depending on who you survey. You survey someone's had a good experience, of course you're going to get it. But I think it's understanding why the customer went in the store and didn't buy anything. I think that's a critical piece of trying to understand, well, they came to you, they wanted to find something that you couldn't offer them. So what was the reason they walked out of your store without it? Was it you didn't have it in stock? Was it you didn't sell a product that they thought you did? Was it they had a really bad customer experience with one of your sales associates? So I think there's a whole piece around how do you measure customers' experience, and not just the ones that are bought, but the ones that haven't, and try and work out, well, how can we get them back in and buying from us. And I think just around customer service, I think we've all seen retail customer service go down in Australia, and I think, I think back to my experience with Apple years and years ago when I was in New York, and this is probably 10 years ago, and going into the Apple store, and we went in and I wanted a certain case from that they didn't have in the store, and instead of the guy just saying, sorry, we don't sell that, he gets out his iPad and says, Googles it, finds one that someone else, not Apple, some other provider makes on a different website. And he said, is this the one you want? And I said, yes. And he just said, what's your email? And he just emailed me that and allowed me to go and purchase it through my device, through another. And I thought, what great customer experience. He's led me to someone else's site to buy something else. But you know what? I walked out of there satisfied. Very satisfied. It makes me go back in. And I think they're the experiences that make you really, truly value a brand, and it makes you loyal to them. So, I always think Apple, they have an amazing way of training up their employees, and they're really engaged in serving the customer. So I think that's really important. And then the last one is around opportunities. I think my experience from a lot of companies, and especially in the retail space, is I don't think people really value, they value Omni, but they don't recognise the value in the website and the asset that it is. And I think, I've seen a lot of big retail companies that spend millions of dollars on above the line advertising, but sort of have a really poor experience on their website. And if you actually think about it, customers, often their first in-range to you is they actually go to the website. And I think, if you just spend take a few million from your above the line and actually invest it into the website, you could really convert a lot more customers than just putting advertising out in the market. And I think companies some companies still aren't putting two and two together. And I think, you don't have to invest millions, but putting a really good investment, because that is your number one marketing tool now, is the website. And so I think there's some real opportunities to drive to.
Fantastic. Now, one final question, and a bit of a hypothetical, but if you were to invite maybe two people into your next boardroom, but dead or alive, who would they be and why?
Well, the first one has to be Elon Musk.
Yeah.
I can't get enough of what he's done, and I think what I really would love to understand is how he motivates his employees. Because if you think he started, SpaceX, Tesla, and Solar City all in the last 8 years, and it's gone from an idea, and you can imagine saying, I'm going to develop an electric car, or I'm going to send rockets to the moon, and to actually having something that not only works. And they've been able to get there, and they've got some of the most amazing. I just don't know how he's done it, because I've seen organisations where we try and come up with an idea that's not even anything like that, and it takes us years. So I just want to understand how he
enables that.
How he brings people along the journey. That's really it. He's got an idea, and then he brings them along, and he gets them so involved in it that they then go and create. Because if you look at the Tesla car, the things inside the car, you just think someone has really sat down and thought about this. So I think he'd be amazing. Plus also his leadership. He is a CEO of 3 different companies 2 days a week. So how can you be the CEO of some of the biggest companies in the world and you only do it 2 days a week? So I'm just so curious as to how he's been able to do that. The other one would be actually Warren Buffett. I've always been amazed I met him years and years ago when I was living in the States, and I'd like to bring him onto the board to get him to have a look at our company and see if he'd invest, and then if he wouldn't, what are we doing wrong? Try and understand, what are the fundamentals that he looks for when he's making those investment decisions, and do we have them, do we not have them, and what do we need to do differently? I think he's really interesting.
Gone full circle to your Goldman Sachs days.
No. I actually met him when I was at business school.
Oh,
he
right.
came and spoke. He's really, really interesting guy.
Good. Thank you for those comments.
That's
Thanks so much for your time.
No worries.